Greetings, and welcome back to the No Channel. This is Bernadette Johnson. I'm also known as Keziah or Kizzy. And today I'm coming to you with a part 2 of the video that I made on yesterday on the Sibyls and Cybele the goddess. And in this one, I'm going to discuss getting too caught up in semantics and etymology. Now, semantics, etymology. Semantics mean more like the meaning of a word, linguistics. Etymology means the origin of the word. And I must say up front, when I see and realize and find out that I'm in error on something, or at the time when I bring a message, I don't have the full picture, I am all too willing to come back and correct myself. I'm not too proud, I'm not too big and mighty to do that. So today, I'm coming to make a correction. Because when I made part 2, I was not aware of the bigger picture. Of course, if you listen to part 1 of the Sibyls and the Cybele, the goddess, I was reaction after being accused of teaching, promoting the teaching of a witch, and pushing goddess worship, because it was in reference to the book commentary that I did on the Sibyls, and this book was written by Mama Zoe, and even in that book commentary, I warned those whoever was to read it, you're going to have your spiritual filters on. You have to read it with your spiritual filters, because there is a lot of things in that book that does promote adultery, that does go against the scriptures, against the Bible. But there are also some gems in there that should be picked out, and unfortunately that's how it is for us. So much of our history, so much of our culture have been dispersed, and a lot of it is bogged down in a bunch of falsehood and a bunch of junk, and this book is no exception. However, this book still resonated with me because there are still some gems. But not to get lost on that, let me go into the discussion where I correct my error. In part 1, I was not aware of what I'm aware of now, but thankfully, the set apart spirit, the Holy Spirit as some call it, led me to go back to that book, the Sibyls, and reread a part that I did not comprehend when I read it the first time, nor when I read it the second time. But after this, being accused of pushing goddess worship and this and that, I was led to go back and read parts of that book, and I'm glad I did. So now I can come back to you and correct and clarify. Okay, so let's go to this next slide here. Now this is on page 24 of the book of the said book, The Sibyls, the first prophetess of Mami Wada, The Theft of African Prophecy by the Catholic Church by Mama Zoe. So this is a passage from the book. The name Sibyl is of mixed origins. It is a sacred initiatory title, and I have certain terms and sentences underlined for a reason. That's because I'm getting ready to go later on, go back and expound upon those. Okay, it is a sacred initiatory title that the ancient Africans called the prophetess and priestesses of Mami Wadas. According to some, it is derived from the Black Ethiopian Cushites, known as the Phrygians, which is the natives of Mycenae. Their name of endearment for Mami Wada was Cybele, 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 I think that's K, that's the Roman pronunciation of it, and which means Queen of Heaven, Mother of the Gods. Some scholars believe that Sibyl is a Greek corruption of two words, Sioi, meaning God, and Boule, meaning to counsel. Both words are derived from their Afro-Aeolitic dialect of ancient Mycenae. I'm sorry, okay, this is two different spellings of it. Combined, it reads as Sibyl, which phonetically evolved into the English Sibyl. Additionally, Webster's dictionary defines a Sibyl as a female prophet, or a woman who is able, sorry, I left off the is, who is able to utter the oracles and prophecies of a god, or a woman who can foretell the future. Conversely, now brace yourself for this one, conversely, under the bitter Hebrew patriarchs, the Sibyls are condemned in their Bible as the Bahalath Ob, meaning evil serpent spirit or mistress of Python. However, when all is said and done, the Sibyl refers to themselves as the sisters of Isis and sometimes prophetess of the Black Diana. There's a whole lot to unpack here. But the first thing I like to say, in my first video on the Sibyls, I made it clear that I was not pushing Isis worship, Black Diana worship, which we know that this Mami Wata is tied to all of those goddesses. I made that clear. But this is about semantics. So you made those who were thinking that I was pushing goddess worship, those who accuse me of pushing goddess worship, you may think, oh, you got me. You won the argument. I am pushing goddess worship. This proves that Kizzy or Bernadette or Keziah, whatever you call me, is pushing goddess worship. It is right here in the very book that she's giving this commentary on. That's the argument one would make when they get caught up in semantics and etymology. Okay, so now let's unpack. I'm not going to go in order as they're underlined because I don't want to. There's certain arguments I don't want to make just yet. The first one I'm going to start with is where it says, additionally, Webster's dictionary defines a Sibyl as a female prophet. And as I explained to you all in my first two videos, that was my, oh goodness, no. Yes, I explained to you that was my usage of it. I was using Sibyl as that, a female prophet. Of course, I was aware of other ways that this word could be defined. But that's simply as I was using it. Because why? Because I'm mainly speaking to English speakers. And from the sources that I consulted, they used this word and they presented it as a word of Greek origin. But now that I know, and also in part one, I said that there were sources that suggest that Sibyl could have possibly had Shemitic origin. But the way it looked, it could be more of Hamitic. But whether it's Hamitic or whether it's Shemitic, it is of African origin. And now that I know that the goddess Cybele has African origin, see, at the time I did the video, because this was also mentioned, this people, Mycenae people, Phrygian people, was mentioned in the article, the Wikipedia article about the goddess Cybele. I was not aware of the African ties. Now that I'm aware of that, yes, I can see how Sibyl and Cybele can be related. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to just fall down on my knees and repent and say, oh, I'm pushing the goddess. Because no, because I had made it clear the only way I was using Sibyl is just to say a female prophet. And I also said that we are speaking a bastardized language which is English. And a lot of the words that English use is of Greek and Latin origin. And honestly, it didn't come as a great surprise to me to find out that, yes, the Sibyls actually does have some pagan ties. I already made that argument. And like I said, even with the name Yah, there is a Egyptian moon god named Yah. So that's why getting too bogged down, getting too caught up in semantics is a waste of time, because it is an argument no one can win. Because somebody can always find, oh, we know what the word you use, the name you use, oh, it come from such and such and such. The name you use, it come from such and such and such. The thing is, you have to listen to the overall message of that person. And in my first video on the Sibyls, my overall message was to show how the matriarchy was overthrown and how a lot of the writings, the African sacred texts, were stolen by the Catholic Church and compiled in what we know today as the scriptures. And when I see, that's what really intrigued me about that book. Other than that, I would have taken no interest in that book. But when I hear something being referred to, when I hear something about the Bible, the scriptures, a book that I cherish above everything, above all other books, that's going to get my attention. And that's the only reason that's the main reason that I took a great interest in this book, when I found out that it was talking about sacred African texts that was stolen from the Africans, stolen by the Catholic Church. And that was my main argument, and to show the origin of this gender war. And I truly believe that's what, I won't go into that quite yet. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so now, and continuing about the, woman able to utter oracles and prophecies of a god. And of course, Sibyl being what I thought was a word of Greek origin, but either way, it's of pagan origin. Of course, it's going to say, utter the oracles and prophecies of a god. Because it is a pagan origin, it's going to refer to higher powers as a god. But like I explained in the first part of this video, I said, well, if a woman can utter the prophecies of a god, why can't she also utter the prophecies of the Most High? That's the point that I was making. A woman who can foretell the future. That's the type of prophecy. Now this sentence here, under the bitter Hebrew patriarchs. And this is what she called the Hebrew patriarchs. Like I told you, there's some anti-biblical undertones here. The Sibyls are condemned in their Bible as a Bahalath old, meaning, like I said, serpent spirit and the mistress of Python. Let me explain to you what she's referring to. Excuse me. Because when I looked up this word, of course, it means like evil spirits. She's talking about two figures in the Bible. One was in the book of Samuel. It's about the witch of Endor, the woman with the familiar spirits. When King Shaul, he had fallen out of favor with the Most High. The set apart of the prophets was not communicating with him. Samuel was not communicating with him. He even consulted the Urim and Thummim. That the Urim and Thummim wasn't even communicating with him, because see, he was in disobedience. So he had to consult alternative means to find out, whether or not he would have the victory in this battle against, I believe he was fighting against the Philistines. So he had to go find this woman with familiar spirits. And if you read this book, The Sibyls, it says that it makes a claim that one of the Sibyls was actually the witch of Endor, which I said that some of these Sibyls were wicked. A lot of them were dealing in dark arts. And this is an example of one of those wicked Sibyls. The next one, the mistress of the Python. If you read Acts 16:16, where Apostle Paul, or Shaul as he called in Hebrew, talks about, he cast that spirit out of the damsel with the spirit of divination. But in some translations, it says she had the spirit of Python. and which means the python. So this was also a Sibyl, and if y'all doesn't change my mind, I'm going to do a short video on this damsel. I want to go into, because there's some things that was missed on this. So these are the two figures that Mama Zogby is referring to: the witch of Endor and the damsel with the spirit of divination, the spirit of Puthan, or spirit of the python. So that's what she those are the figures she was talking about, and she was saying, that the Bible was speaking, negatively of these two figures. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so what else do I want? Okay, yeah. When I underline according to some in my first video, when I did the AI, it was said that some people would make that connection according to some, that the Sibyls derive from Cybele because of the similarity of the phonetic, their sound. And so this kind of is in accord with what the AI came up with. And now that I know that the Mycenae is of Cushite origin, and the Cybele was actually in a god of Africa, a goddess of African origin, yes, I can see how Cybele and Sibyl would be related. But like I said, it comes as no surprise, because we are speaking bastardized languages. Things are all muddled up. But I explained that that's not how I was not when I say Sibyls, when I was talking about Sibyls, when I was saying there were righteous Sibyls of the Bible, I was simply meaning female prophets or prophetesses. Just as simple as that. Okay, next one. I underline title. So this Sibyl was an initiatory title that the ancient Africans called the prophetesses and priestesses of Mami Wata. So Sibyl is a title. Now I know sometimes it may refer to as a name, like in this next one here. Their name of endearment, talking about the Mycenae people, or the Phrygians, their name of endearment for Mommy was Cybele. So it looks like Cybele was actually Mommy. So there's too much of a connection here to say that one didn't derive from the other. So yes, I admit I was incorrect here. It is evidence seems to suggest that one did derive from the other. However, that doesn't discredit my commentary on the book The Sibyls, because see, the discussion was not to promote the mommy worship. No, it was not about that at all. The reason for the commentary on the book, as I said, was to show how the matriarchy was overthrown through time, and how the Catholic Church stole a lot of the sacred African texts. And of course, many of you Israelites, or those who call yourself Hebrew Israelites, y'all say all day, every day, that the Bible is Black history. The Bible is an African book. So if the Bible is Black history and the Bible is an African book, is it a stretch to say that the African woman, the Black woman, didn't have a hand in writing it? Is that a stretch to say that? But no, a lot of you, when you heard that commentary, you was triggered by the gender war part. You were triggered by how the matriarchy was in high standing at one time. You were triggered by how I said that the patriarchy overthrew the matriarchy. You were triggered by when I said that the African man was the Black woman's, or the African woman's, first oppressor. That's what you were triggered by. And what you did, you started going into semantics. Arguing on semantics, arguing on etymology, because you thought that was an argument you could win by discrediting the entire message. Or you accuse me of teaching on the Sibyls. I'm not teaching on the Sibyls. Even when I said that, when I mentioned the Sibylline oracles, I'm not even teaching the Sibylline oracles. I was just showing you that there is something that you can read to show that yes, it's possible that this was a part of the sacred text that the Catholics stole. Part of it that the Catholics stole. So no, I'm not teaching the Sibyls. My commentary is on the book and good information that can be taken out of the book. And a lot of you have read a lot of books written by Afrocentrists who actually didn't believe in the Bible, but you got some good, useful information out of it. And this is all that I'm doing here. Okay. Let's go back to the title here. Now, I said that the Sibyls, from what we read here, is a title. It was an initiatory title that the ancient Africans used for the prophetesses and the priestesses of the Mami Watas. And it's also a name of endearment for Mommy with Cybele. And so I said, okay, so I determined that this Sibyl is just that, a title. And when I came to that conclusion, it brought to mind another title, Lord. And of course, and if you just talking with a lot of Israelites, those of who are the Israelite way, the Hebrew Israelite, they'll say, no, we don't use Lord, because Lord is tied to Baal, which was used by Canaanite gods. And then they, and it was also, used, for many other deities. So Lord, is used for Baal. And that's why you have some, not all of them, but you have some Israelites, Hebrew Israelites, those who are of the Israelite way, they don't use it, because even though if you read your King James Version, the Lord is in there, and what it is, they substituted the YHWH, or some say Yah, some say Yahuwah, some say Yahweh, and put Lord in there. They took out his name. Some say, say that it was it was the name of the Most High was too sacred to be pronounced. But no, they did that for a reason, because they knew the set apart, they knew that name was a great name. So for wicked purposes, I'll put it this way, they took out that name and they replaced it with the Lord. So let's continue discussing this Lord here. However, you read about this Lord, and some would say, I don't use the Lord because it's the name Baal. It means Baal. So let's read the Baal in Wikipedia. Baal was a title and honorific meaning owner or lord in the Northwest Shemitic languages spoken in the Levant during antiquity. For its use among people, it came to be applied to gods. Scholars previously associated the theonym with solar cults and with a variety of unrelated patron deities. But inscriptions have shown that the name Baal was, listen to this, was particularly associated with the storm and fertility god Hadad and his local manifestations. So this Baal was associated with a god of the name Hadad or Hadad. So this Baal was originally a title. It says it, a title, an honorific title. And you have to look at the meaning. It means owner. It means Lord. And then the next one is just on Hadad, where under it says Baal was also used as a proper name. So over time, Baal took on, they took on Baal as the actual name of Hadad. But this God, this Canaanite God, actually had a name, Hadad. So you see how over times things can evolve. The meaning of words can change. Their usage, how it's used can be changed. And the point I'm trying to make about this Lord, if someone says, the Lord this, the Lord that, and you know they're referring to the Most High, why will you stone them when you know what they mean, the Lord? You may tell them, okay, you may share with them a little history, but when you know what a person's mean, that's the thing. When you listen to a person, a lot of times you can see where they're coming from. They make it plain to you that they're not trying to push this and push that. Push, a false God and this and that. So for instance, the Lord. So someone say the Lord's going to do this, the Lord's going to do that. I believe, in the Lord. Would you dismiss them as a worshiper of Baal? No. Because at the end of the day, the Lord is a title. The Lord means ruler. Isn't the Most High a ruler? So I want to go, and speaking of, so you have to also look at the meaning of these words as well. And the point I'm trying to make is, let's go to this next slide here. This is another pagan god, Jupiter. And then that's the Roman god. Zeus is the Greek god, which is pretty much the same god. It's the same god, just a different, name. What does it mean? The greatest of the gods, the god of the sky, the weather, who ruled over human beings and the other gods. And also both Zeus and Jupiter are considered the king of the gods of gods. Who else is called that? The Lord of Lords. Who else is called the Lord of Lords, King of Kings? He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. So even if that person is not exactly using the right name, you know what they mean. And these pagans, as I had said in the first part of the first video on the Sibyls, how the Mami Wata was trying to establish herself as the divine feminine. And I also mentioned that, yes, the Most High is part masculine and part feminine. So part of him is divine feminine. You have these gods and goddesses. So this one, I'm going to talk about the goddesses. Just like these gods trying to establish themselves as a king of the gods, you have these goddesses doing the same thing with the divine feminine. Let's go back. Let's go back to my second slide here. What's the meaning of Cybele? Queen of heaven, mother of the gods. She's trying to establish herself as the divine feminine. Now, of course, those who believe that the Most High is masculine only, you see divine feminine as just another goddess, but I beg to differ. And I explained that in the Sibyls, the book commentary. So just like Jupiter and just like Zeus, this Cybele or whatever, Mami Wata, whatever, she's trying to establish herself as the mother of the gods. So you also have to look at these meanings of these words, of these names, of these titles. Okay. I believe I said all I wanted to say. Oh, one more thing. Remember how I said how the different entries about the different entries that I showed you of how Sibyl is defined? It looked like they always try to throw shade, try to attach her to a witch, try to attach her to evil. In the first part, I didn't quite explain why they do that. They're doing that because they are the Sibyls. Although they have whitewashed the Sibyls, the real Sibyls were black. And that's why I didn't make this connection at first, because they only said that Sibyl was just of Greek and Latin origin. They omitted its African or Afro-Asiatic origin. And so they put a negative connotation to Sibyls because they know the powers that be. They know it is a black origin. So they give a negative connotation to it. They just say, oh, it's just a part of Greek myth. And and going to find out Greek myth is a mixture of fact and fiction. That's one thing about Greek myth. It's a mixture of fact and fiction. So yeah, you may see these Sibyls in Greek myth, but that doesn't mean that these Sibyls were not real people. And a lot of these Sibyls were called goddesses because of their extraordinary powers. So yes, even in Greek mythology, they may be called goddesses, but because they had extraordinary powers. And that's why, because like God, that means, one with force and power. Even the Bible says, you're not gods. So you're gods. So yeah. So yes, they would be, you will see where sometimes they are referred to as goddesses. So I think that's all that I wanted to bring. So yes, so far as like this Sibyl, they have whitewashed it. The root of it is racism. Because see, I'm going to go about how when I talk about the video, when I make the video on the damsel with the spirit of divinations, I'm going to talk about how yes, these Sibyls, when the matriarchy was declining, this was during the Greco-Roman period, a lot of these Sibyls were enslaved. So this damsel with the spirit of divination was actually a slave. She was actually a servant. And I'll go into that. So yes, these Sibyls were they were enslaved, and they was also getting killed off. Oh, I'm sorry. They were also being unalived. But yet you had these church fathers and the powers that be saw their power, and they tried to use, they use what they could of it. But yet, once they got what they needed from these Sibyls, they discarded them like trash. And as I said before, there were Sibyls who were, righteous. I mean, if I know some of you have a problem with the usage of that word, but understand how I'm meaning it in this instance. I'm meaning it simply as a female prophet. And as I said in part 1, I only use Sibyls when I'm referring, and it's something within context of the book, the Sibyls. And and also said too that as far as like the origin, I was thinking it had some Shemitic origin or something like that, but no, it looks like it's more of a Hamitic origin. But who knows? Who knows what's going to eventually be discovered about it? But anyway, I think that's all I had about this particular one. I want to do a part 2 after, learning that, yeah, there is an Afro-Asiatic connection. I would hope that this is my last video clarifying it and setting the record straight. But I must say that in that first video, I moved in haste because I was trying to defend myself. I was so in haste and I was trying to defend myself. But thankfully, the Holy Spirit led me to go back and read the book. So hopefully, I made it clear, and I'm, as I said before, I'm more than willing to come back and make things, right, and make a correction to my error. I'm not above that. And so that's maturity. That's growing, because I don't know everything. So I hopefully, and like I said, I do not want to be guilty of misleading my listeners. Because you may go back and you may read this book and you may see this connection here. And that's when I read this, I said, well, let me do another video. So I will hopefully this will be my last one where I address, these accusations that's been made against me. So that's all I have. And I just thank you all for watching. And I pray that you all be blessed.